Hello students, welcome to the EPG Patashala. I am Dr. Gaurinath from School of Life Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Today I am going to talk about module on supersecondary structures, motifs and domains from paper Biomolecules and Their Interactions. In this module we will learn about supersecondary structures. We call them also motifs in protein structures. I will also introduce you about domain structures and what kind of domains. Domains can be divided into many families, and we'll introduce you some of the families and with examples. The supersecondary structures are secondary structures arranged in a group and exist in many different structures, completely different unrelated proteins. These secondary structures are connected by a loop or turn to form supersecondary structures. These are basically building blocks of protein structures. They are smaller than domain or subunit, but they could act as a nucleation in the process of protein folding. These supersecondary structures or motifs can exist independently of the protein structure. I will describe about 8 supersecondary structures in this module. Example: beta hairpin, helix turn helix, zinc finger, beta alpha beta motif, alpha alpha motif or coil coil, Greek key motif, EF hind motifs, omega loop. These 8 supersecondary structures we will discuss one by one in detail. Beta hairpin. So this is one of the simplest supersecondary structures where two antiparallel beta strands connected by a loop or a turn which looks like a hairpin. So it's very similar to our hairpin which girls keep on the hair. So basically two beta sheets are connected by a loop or a turn, and this is the simplest structure which can actually independently occur in isolation. So you can design a small beta hairpin which can stable in the solution. You can see here in the figure, so the two beta sheets are connected, the antiparallel beta sheets are connected by a loop, and the dash lines are indicating the hydrogen bond between the two beta strands. Helix turn helix. So the two helices are connected by a small loop or a turn. These helices are stabilized by non-polar contacts between these two helices, and these mostly are found in the DNA binding proteins, are directly involved in DNA binding. So these motifs are about generally 20 amino acids, and where the second helix is always involved in DNA binding. So the second helix enters into the major groove of the DNA target binding site, and the other helix and these two helices are kind of stabilize their orientation by several hydrophobic interactions between these two helices. Here you can see the figure where the two helix turn helix. So the N-terminal one is one which doesn't N-terminal helix which doesn't bind to DNA, whereas the C-terminal helix, that's the second helix, which is the recognition helix. So the one side of the helix which interacts with the other helix through the non-polar interactions, the orientation of helix becomes stable, and the other side of the helix, which generally consists of polar residues, which enters into the major groove as shown here in the major groove of the DNA. So the example which we have shown here, phage Crow DNA part, and the OR1 is the protein where this helix turn helix is taken from. So the second helix enters into the major groove of the DNA helix. Zinc finger motif. So the zinc atom which stabilizes this structure, and that's what we call the zinc finger motif, and this fold is stabilized by coordination with zinc. So each motif contains about 30 to 50 amino acids. So these motif sequences may not be conserved, they could be very different, but the specific position of cysteine and histidine which remains the constant, and these cysteines and histidine which actually coordinate with the zinc atom. So by simple sequence homology, we may not identify whether this is a zinc finger motif, but a specific pattern of cysteine and histidine if you look into, then you can identify this is a zinc finger motif. And they generally have one small helix and two small antiparallel beta sheets in each zinc finger, and zinc holds this alpha helix and beta sheets together, and zinc finger is mostly involved in DNA binding. You can see the zinc finger motif figure here. So you have two cysteines separated by 2 to 4 residues, and then you have a large loop about large linker regions, 12 to 14 amino acids, and another small then the histidine. Between the two histidines, about 3 to 5 amino acids. So these two histidines and two cysteines would coordinate with the zinc that kept together this whole structure. So these 12 amino acids and the C-terminal part, which actually forms the long helix, and there are the cysteine side were two beta sheets which form a small two beta sheets where the cysteines come from, and these two together form small zinc finger motifs. And each zinc finger motif will recognize about 3 to 5 nucleotides in the DNA. So zinc finger motif containing proteins generally don't have 1 or 2 zinc finger motifs. They have 3 to 30 zinc finger motifs. So each finger recognizes about 3 to 5 DNA nucleotides, and overall together all zinc finger motifs recognizes large sequence of DNA where they need to recognize. Beta alpha beta motif. Two beta strands are connected by a long region containing alpha helix. So these two beta strands form parallel beta sheets. The loop regions connecting the beta sheet and helix can have a different length, so the length could be vary, and the helix axis is generally parallel to the beta sheets. So basically two parallel beta sheets and one parallel helix in the same orientation. So 3 secondary structures are stabilized by several hydrophobic interactions, the two beta sheets and alpha helix. Almost all the proteins containing parallel beta sheets have this motif. You could also have large loops, but generally they have alpha helix in these motifs. So these motifs are generally found in right-handed conformation, that is a helix above the plane of the two beta sheets. So there is a beta sheet, helix just goes above and then takes a turn, another beta sheet comes down. The helix is generally not seen below the plane of the beta sheets. If you look at all the beta alpha beta motifs, the almost 100% the helix is above the plane of the beta sheet in right-handed conformation. So here I have shown the beta alpha motif in the figure. So you can see one as a cartoon where right-handed twist is very clear. So the beta sheet and the alpha helix and another beta sheet. So the beta sheets are below and alpha helix is just above the plane, and the second one is an example from the protein structure where you can see the N-terminal beta sheet is coming and there is a alpha helix above the two beta sheets, and then from the helix the beta sheet is going down and forming a parallel beta sheet with the first beta sheet. Alpha alpha motif or coils. This motif is also given different names. We'll discuss as we go ahead. The coils where two helices are wound up with each other. So the alpha helices are packed together through the hydrophobic interactions. So these two helices are found to be stable in solution. So these two helices by themselves form a stable coil helix. They're generally found in transcription factors, intermediate filaments, etc. They have specific amino acid repeat sequences. They have heptad repeat sequences in these coils. So as I said, they have a heptad repeat. So how come the heptad repeats? So there are 3.6 residues per turn. We know the property of alpha helix. So per 2 turns you have 7.2 amino acids. So if you approximately you take it, there are 7 amino acids per 2 turns. So if you have every first amino acid will come at the same side of the alpha helix. So if you have 7 amino acids can be denoted as A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and where the A and D are hydrophobic residues and E and G are generally found to be charged amino acids. So for every turn, there could be a one hydrophobic amino acid, that's A, or there could be two hydrophobic amino acids, A and D, and these generally come the one side of the alpha helix. So the two alpha helices, so the one side of alpha helix has all these hydrophobic amino acids. So basically it those two alpha helices stick to each other. Now helices is generally straight parallel cylinders, but for consideration we said 7 amino acids per 2 turns, but actually it is 7.2 amino acids per 2 turns. So if you take longer coils, so if you increase as the length of the coil helix increases, they actually look like each alpha helix is wrapping with each other. So that's why they are called coiled coils. So one alpha helix is a coil, and the two alpha helices, they wrap up each other. So that's why we call them as a coiled coil. So the simplest example is GCN4, which is which is a transcription factor. So here I've shown the structure of coiled coil. So you can clearly see that A and D of the two helices, which are seen coming the one side. So here very easily, all of them are leucines. So the leucine from the one helix and the leucines from other helix, they come together and forms a strong hydrophobic core in the center. And the E and G are here you can see the glutamic acid and lysine, and the glutamic acid and lysine. So they form a salt bridges. So you can see in the both figures the glutamic acid and lysine forming the salt bridges covering the hydrophobic residues. So the hydrophobic residues are packed in the center, and these hydrophobic residues are protected from the water by these ionic interactions. Thus, both hydrophobic contacts interactions are stabilized and protected from the hydrophilic water environment. So even if you simplest example is that if you take every seventh residue as a leucine, and I've shown you the example here, all the leucine is coming on the similar axis on the helix. So there is a small shift, as I said, that's how they form coiled coil. So the leucines come on the one side of the helix, and the next slide you can see that. So the one side you have leucines in one side of the helical axis. The other side, between the 4 amino acids, there is a small pocket, or there is a small hole. So this leucine from the one helix actually enters into the hole of the next helix. So these coils are also called as the leucine zippers. So this is why leucine zippers. It's something like a zip which we see on our jackets or our trousers, where the two knobs from the one side, this makes a small space between the two knobs, and another knob from the another side of the zip enters into the gap between the two knobs. So here in the leucine zippers, there is a 4 amino acids which make a small hole, and this leucine from the other helix actually enters there. So that's why we also call them as a leucine zippers. So the coils also can be called as a alpha-alpha motif or leucine zippers. Greek key motif. So Greek key motifs are made up of beta sheets. There are 4 adjacent antiparallel beta strands linked by loops. So the 3 antiparallel beta sheets are connected by 3 loops. So the pattern is very similar to ornamental pattern used in ancient Greece. Therefore, these are called Greek key motif. Here the Greek key motif structure is shown here. So where it's a small beta sheet, and there's a small loop connecting the another beta sheet, they form antiparallel beta sheets. And this second beta sheet and third beta sheets are also connected by a small loop, and that forms antiparallel beta sheet. And this third beta sheet, which is connected by a longer loop, and becomes antiparallel beta sheet to the first beta sheet. So the first and fourth beta sheets are antiparallel to each other, and which is the third and fourth beta sheets are connected by a longer loop. The simplest example is gamma crystalline, which is shown here, where the 4 beta sheets are in one plane, and how the loops are connecting these beta sheets can be clearly seen here. EF Hine motif. EF Hine motif is first time reported in pravalbumin. it will be interesting to know why the name of E-affine motif is assigned to this motif. The first time when pivot structure was determined, the helices were named after A, B, C, D, E, F. So the loop containing 5th helix and the 6th helix, connecting the 5th helix and 6th helix, are actually bound to calcium. And because its helix was named after E and F, it's termed as E-affine motif. And interestingly, even now, we call wherever the calcium binding motif, which has a similar kind of structure, we call it as a E-affine motif. Now the E-affine motif generally has 12 amino acids, and because it binds to calcium, the carboxy containing amino acids are common. The carboxyl group of aspartic acid, glutamic acid and main chain carbonyl groups coordinate with calcium. Now E-affine motifs are seen in almost all calcium binding calcium signaling proteins, example calmodulin, troponin C. Now generally they are a very typical sequence where the first amino acid is always aspartic acid, third amino acid is always either aspartic acid or asparagine, fifth amino acid is always aspartic acid, sixth amino acid is mostly glycine, and 12th amino acid is always mostly glutamic acid. Now these two helices are bound to calcium, and these helices, when the calcium is bound, they are perpendicular to each other. But this is the loop, this is a helix E and this is a helix F. Now when this calcium is bound to this loop, these two helices are perpendicular to each other. But when the calcium is removed or released, these helices become parallel to each other. Now in the protein structures, E-affine motifs function as a couple or as together. The two E-affine motifs come together to form a functional domain. So when the calcium is there, two E-affine motifs open up, and there is a hydrophobic core in the center, and this hydrophobic core can interact with other proteins and induce a conformational change in the signaling pathway where they are involved in. When the calcium is not there, when these two helices become parallel to each other and the hydrophobic core collapses. When the calcium is not there, when the hydrophobic core is closed, these domains cannot interact with the target proteins, and that's how the calcium signaling changes the conformation of calmodulin or calcium binding proteins or calcium signaling proteins, and that eventually change the function of the target proteins. So the E-affine motifs, as I described before, the calcium bound E-affine motifs which are perpendicular to each other. So when the calcium is bound, you can see the aspartic acid and glutamic acid which are interacting with the calcium, they are perpendicular to each other. So this is a classical example of calmodulin and crystal structure. So when the calcium is removed, this structure becomes completely collapsed and these two helices become parallel to each other. So the right side one, which is shown here, unbound structure, where the two helices becomes parallel to each other. In this slide 25, I have shown you the movie when the calcium is removed and when the calcium is present, how the structural changes is taking place from the parallel to anti-parallel, from perpendicular to parallel alpha helices taking place. Omega loop. The omega loop is where the beginning and end of the loop come together. It's basically the shape is similar to the Greek capital letter omega, which we have seen, know that very clear. So this is a compact globular structure. There is no regular repeating pattern seen in hydrogen bonds in this structure. The side chains pack into the center of the loop. Omega loops have specific functions, like they form two proteins interact with each other to form dimers. There could be a phosphate binding loop of the nucleotide binding proteins. So these are about 5 to 10 amino acids loops which form this kind of functions. The omega loop, the classical example is interleukin 1b. You can see the omega loop here. so where the beginning and end actually come together. So here these are actually connecting the two beta sheets here. Domains. Domains are formed by different combinations of secondary structures, super secondary structures, motifs connected by loops and turns. It is a conserved part of the protein sequence and structure. So the domain structure in evolution is they are well conserved. They can evolve with a function and can exist independent of the protein structure, total protein. These domains, they have sequence of the core will generally remain constant, similar, but domain loops can evolve and change. Each domain forms a compact three-dimensional structure, often independently stable and can be folded. So they can be folded or refolded, independent of the total protein structures. Domains generally vary from 30 amino acids to 500 amino acids. They are often independent functional units. Each domain generally have its own independent hydrophobic core surrounded by hydrophilic amino acids. So because they have independent hydrophobic core, they can be denatured and refolded. They can fold independent of the total protein structure. The domains broadly we can classify into four following classes. All alpha domains, which we have discussed before, only contains alpha helices. All beta domains only has beta sheets, which are again discussed in another module. Alpha plus beta domains, the mixture of alpha and beta subunits, and alpha slash beta domains, the combination of alpha, beta, alpha motifs. So basically it has a beta sheet, alpha helix, beta sheet, is randomly repeat and form a domain. Predominantly form parallel beta sheet surrounded by alpha helices. These domains are generally limited in size, even though we may say that they can exist from 30 amino acids to 500 amino acids. 90% of the domains are less than 200 amino acids. So the average domain size is about 100 amino acids, and with generally one hydrophobic core per single domain. The large domains, large proteins can have multiple domains, like subunit containing proteins. The small changes in the linker regions can hamper and change the domain arrangement. So they can do a domain swapping. This domain swapping can cause oligomerization of these molecules. So the domain, let's say that the linker which connects these two domains, and there is a small change in this linker. So these two domains can become like this, but similarly the other homologous domain part can come and interact like this and form oligomeric state of the domain. Now if they become only dimer and trimer, it's fine, but becomes longer, then we'll have many disease problems. Domains also can be classified approximately 800-fold families if you go more into details. Here I have shown the example of alpha plus beta domain and alpha beta domain. So the alpha plus beta domain, the classical example is the PAF phosphatase, where you can see that a lot of beta sheets and alpha helices are exist in the structure, but they don't have a similar. They have both alpha helices and beta sheets in the structure. Whereas the alpha beta domain, you have alpha helix beta sheet randomly repeated, and all the beta sheets are in the center as a core of the protein structure, and the beta sheets cover on the surface of the structure. So this is a typical alpha beta domain example is trisulfophosphate isomerase. Here I am showing the examples of domain structures. Earlier we have discussed what kind of domains exist. Here it is showing the example of all alpha domain. Here I am showing the example of myoglobin. But you can also see the all alpha domain models and the examples in module 5, where we have discussed turn motifs and domains. And you can also look at the myoglobin hemoglobin structure, another module number 8, where you can details of the myoglobin you can be seen. So myoglobin has about 8 alpha helices where heme group is attached in the center. The another example which I have shown you is alpha beta domain is S4D, the superoxide dismutase, and again you can see the other module for more examples of only beta sheet containing domain structures. So here the S4D, which has a typical Greek key motif where 4 beta sheets are arranged in a Greek key motif manner, and there are actually the 2 Greek key motifs which form a beta barrel kind of a structure in this structure, that is superoxide dismutase. So students, let us summarize what we have learned in this module. The proteins are made up of either single domain or multiple domains, and each domain can be classified into more than 800 groups by simple classification of domains. But in the simple classification, they can also be divided into 4 classes, either beta sheet domain, alpha helix domain, or combination of beta sheet alpha helix domain. Now each domain is a combination of motif or supersecondary structures. Like the secondary structures will form a supersecondary structures, and supersecondary structures together come to form domain structures. Now the supersecondary structures, we have discussed about 8 supersecondary structures in this module, and these are independent structures. They act as a nucleation for protein folding. And as I have discussed, these supersecondary structures also important to perform the function, a specific function of the protein. Thank you.